Dear guests, a very warm welcome for tonight's Salon Suisse. We are very happy to have you here in this maybe a little bit oriental atmosphere tonight, so something special. I'm Marianne Burki, the head of visual arts of the Swiss Arts Council, which is responsible for all the Swiss presentation at the Venice Biennale, especially the Swiss Pavilion, and of course the Salon Suisse, where we are today. With me from the team of the Biennale are Rachele Giudici here and Sandi Paucic as well. So welcome everybody. We do believe that talking about things is very important, and we do believe that talking over borders, diversity, over different cultures are really creating the future. And that's why from the Swiss Arts Councils we organize quite a bit of talks. The Salon Suisse has been supported by Laufen Bathrooms from the beginning, a cultural partner in that sense, and has been made possible. So also here, maybe different cultures, an enterprise and an arts councils which go together. We have actually, I have to welcome also guests, hopefully from all over the world, because we have a live streaming of the Salon Suisse over all the period. It is a collaboration with Hochparterre, whom I thank very much. So welcome everybody out there in the world. We just had in Basel, we had a little platform about design, and we had the theme emergency and design. So this is a pure coincidence in that sense. And it was very interesting what came out all of a sudden by the end of the talks. It was a very heated discussion. And exactly because in the beginning I had said about the market and design. And then all of a sudden there was a heated discussion about what should the state support. What kind of art, what kind of architecture, what kind of design. And all of a sudden it was all about, we should just invest in this kind of specific themes like emergency, like what we are going to discuss. And it was interesting to see how ambivalent or how fragile all these expressions are, market or emergency, or what is good and what is bad. And it's not so easy. You cannot say the market is just bad. And you cannot say that working somewhere abroad and trying to help somebody is good. So I think all this ambivalence and how we look at things, the different perspectives, that's what we try to explore also tonight. So I'm very much looking forward to tonight's salon. Welcome to our salonière, Laila El Wakil, and I'm very happy to pass the microphone to you. And have a very nice evening. Oh, not to forget, there will be an oriental buffet at the end of these presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marianne, for those words. And thank you to you, dear public, who are present tonight. It is the last evening of this June session of the Salon Suisse, dedicated to the rediscovery and perpetuation of ancestral technologies and means of building. Yesterday, we had the pleasure to hear Salma Samar Damlouji, who spoke of the extraordinary work she is pursuing in Yemen, especially in the valley of Dawan, with the local master builders. Before that, we listened to the young and inspiring founders of TerraBlock, who spoke about their compressed earth blocks and the ways in which they managed to modernize the ancient building technique. This first salon is about raw earth, about stones, solution about also earth bricks and other low-tech ways of buildings as alternative solutions to high-tech architecture. This purpose of this 2016 Salon Suisse, Wake Up a better path toward architecture is to think about and discuss not only the many different challenges that architecture has to face today, the environmental ones, the social ones, in terms of employment and involvement of the populations, and the economic ones, of course. To answer these problematics, some architects decide to turn back to methods of constructing inherited from or inspired by traditional building techniques. The border between the present and the past, that is to say, between contemporary architecture and heritage in a broad sense, needs to become more fluid, and the link between the two needs to be restored, as indicated by Aravena in the Biennale. Today is dedicated to refugee housing. This afternoon, we visited the Pavilion of Western Sahara curated by Manuel Hertz, architect in Basel, present with us tonight. We will continue with Bill Bouldin from Meshkat Bouldin Agency in Geneva, who, among other realizations, concerned with social purposes, built several years ago refugee dwellings in Gaza with Rachid Al-Rouzi, a local architect. If the Western Sahara camps we have seen in the Giardini today are a well-organized refugee camps supported by Algeria and could work as an example of an urban and political self-managed organization, the situation in Gaza is completely different. Refugees' conditions are very poor there. Bill, taught by the lesson of Hassan Fathi, decided to use the raw mud bricks to build simple habitation units that could shelter homeless families. These constructions look very similar to some of the Hassan Fathi buildings for New Gourna or even Bariz. After your presentation, Bill, the filmmaker Dominique Fleury will present us two short films, one about the occupied territories in Palestine, and the other one about the Yarmouk camp. There will be, of course, a discussion, I hope interesting. And if we are in this setting tonight, we are trying to leave our comfort zone, the usual Le Corbusier seating that occupies the Salon Suisse. They are here at the other part of the salon. And tonight we are in an oriental sitting room with beautiful and bright colors, carpet on the floor, fabrics on the wall, and we would like you to try to adapt and sit on the floor. We have many room till in front of the carpets here. And we would like you to sit in the modest oriental way. We provided you with Aravena's chairless, which is this exactly. Ah, fantastic. You are coming in front, please. And Bill has imitated the chairless by handcrafting his own and simpler chairless that you can see on his neck. And he will distribute you this means so that you can try it and sit down with. As we are in the Ramadan month, the buffet will only be served at 9:35, time at which the sun sets here in Venice. And in the meantime, after the discussion with Bill and Dominique, we will have the pleasure of hearing the directress of Orient Experience, who cooked the delicious buffet for us tonight. Thank you very much. And then, Bill, I give you the mic. Thank you.
So good evening to all of you. In keeping with one of the themes of the biennial this year, we are going to, all of us tonight, be displaced persons. We've all been displaced. We've left home tonight with nothing except the clothes on our backs and a few things in our pockets and maybe what we've been able to bring. We've been given refuge here tonight in the Salon of Pro Helvetia. And there are a few chairs, but we're politely leaving those for the people who might need them most. And what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to make do with what we've got. As you may have heard, necessity is the mother of invention, and looking around, we have some red webbing strap. So, do you have some? Let me throw it to you, excuse me. There we go. Anybody else need one? I mean, this is what we got, so we're going to see what we can do with it, okay? Now, how are we going to sit comfortably? Some of you have already figured out if you look around. If you know anything about Alejandro Aravena, you might get an idea. That's a clue, by the way. So, some of us have a chairless chair that we can buy from Vitra, and some of them are going to make our own. I hope Alejandro will forgive me for stealing his idea, but I'm not stealing it because I'm crediting him with it. And as I know, he has credited the indigenous peoples from whom he learned the chairless technique. So anyway, we'll make do with what we've got, and that's kind of our theme for the evening. Oh, sorry, Leila, of course. Okay. I think I'll go sit down over here now, and these are all for you. I'll keep a chair for myself. Maybe I'll just go on with this. So I have a few notes just so I don't wander too much. I hope you'll excuse me for that. But again, once again, good evening to all of you, and thank you for being here at the Swiss Salon. I would like to thank Pro Helvetia, particularly Jacqueline, Marianne, Sandy, for giving us the opportunity to be here in the context of the Swiss participation in the biennial. And also thanks to the kind staff for their attentive assistance. And especially, of course, I would like to thank Leila El-Vakil for her lively imagination and for giving us all the occasion to meet and exchange our experiences and ideas. I'm Bill Bouldin. I'm an architect from Geneva, as Leila mentioned. You probably have already realized that the unifying theme over these evenings of the first Swiss Salon is to rediscover old and traditional materials, getting back to simple, fundamental skills, and in our cases, using earth to build. If you have had the chance to visit the pavilions, or if you were here for the opening event of the Swiss Salon, you have seen many very creative uses of earth, even inside the main pavilion. Martin Rauch and Anna Haringer and other of my earth construction heroes are presenting very exciting work. TerraBlock's Laurent and Rodrigo have built a beautiful piece of urban landscape in earth blocks just outside. And Salma is helping save some of the world's most stunning vernacular architecture, and especially the construction techniques behind it, from war, neglect, and ignorance. You already know that I'm going to talk about earth construction as well, but really, I'm going to hijack that invitation. Because what I'm going to talk about with you is not really about building with earth, but about building with the means at hand, just like you've made a chair from the means at hand. Imagine that there are 3 conferences in a row about earth construction, and like me, you're the last one to speak about it. You can almost be sure that everything to say about the subject would have already been said by the time they got to you. I find it amazing and reassuring that with 3 conferences about earth architecture, there are so many different aspects and approaches, and that there is no risk of too many repeated ideas. There are always new things to say and new ways of working. we have a kind of resonance amongst us where we share points in common, but we have many differences as well through the orientations of the projects we undertake. I know Leila from the architecture school at the University of Geneva, and I know that we both share an interest in the contributions of Hassan Fatih from many points of view having to do with social orientations, economic resources, as well as the technical means present in his work. When Leila asked me if I would participate in this biennial salon to present a very small project in Gaza, at first I didn't understand and thought I should politely decline, as the ideas of the biennial with many big architectural exhibitions brought to my mind lots of shiny glass and steel and complex computer-generated forms and star architects and mega-scale budgets. Then I discovered the theme of this edition of the biennial, News from the Front, and the director's injunction to examine problems of migration, poverty, conflict, waste, social disequilibrium, and injustice. That is something I can offer. The news of this project in Gaza is coming to you not only from the front, but quite literally from beyond the front. In this case, the architect had to trade his construction site hard hat for a UN blue steel helmet and a flak jacket. I have photos, but I will spare you that indignity. I am a great admirer of the group Forensic Architecture, who you can see exhibited in the main pavilion, and with whom, again, I also feel a certain resonance. You can see their analysis of bomb blast sites in Gaza in the reconstruction of human presence by the shrapnel shadows on the walls created by missile explosions inside war zones. I'm very moved by the powerful work they're doing, and I'm glad they use their architectural skills to document injustice and destruction in many places around the world. Finally, though, we have to go back in where there is destruction and rebuild. I told you I was going to hijack the theme, so here it is. The project I want to present to you is all about expediency. It is about pragmatic realism, to paraphrase again Alejandro Aravena. It is about making do with what we've got. The results are not necessarily beautiful, contrary to what Leila may have suggested this afternoon, but they are very simple and can be carried out by nearly anyone with a little basic training under nearly any circumstances. It is another example of open source technology recovered from the past that is built by the user and by the neighborhood. The architect only starts the project and then lets it live its own life, as you will see. I'd like to talk not about the result, but about the process of assembling a building project, a kind of storytelling about life under duress and with very limited means. What are the particularities of Gaza? Gaza has been in the news over the years for many unfortunate reasons. It is certainly not the only place where refugees are concentrated, as we saw with Manuel Hertz this afternoon. There are sadly too many new places which have emerged to accompany Gaza in an upset world. Since 2005, Israel withdrew troops and colonists from Gaza and closed the borders. The population is now about 1,850,000 inhabitants with a very high birth rate. About 1 million people, over half of the inhabitants, are Palestinian refugees, not indigenous Gazans. There is something like 47% unemployment overall in Gaza, more than 65 to 70% for young people. A few important dates here. 2007 was the embargo on nearly all imports and exports except for medical supplies and a little food. 2008 to 9 was Operation Cast Lead, where over 6,000 homes were completely destroyed or severely damaged. 2012, again, another incursion, Operation Pillar of Defense, with several hundred houses destroyed and many damaged beyond use. 2014 was once again a huge operation with over 12,000 houses, or homes rather, housing units completely destroyed or severely damaged. And we're nearing the 10th year of a continuous embargo on anything that could be called a building material. Elias Anastas, a Palestinian architect, has said, in Gaza, annihilation has become so frequent that building, rebuilding, and destruction are happening all at the same time, which is an interesting and a difficult situation. The result is that today, through destruction and population growth, in the face of an embargo on building materials, there will be a shortfall of about 75,000 housing units in the next years. In addition to my activities as an architect in Geneva, I have for a number of years consulted with the ILO and a number of other agencies, piecing together multi-component projects around the construction sector that address unemployment issues. This can involve microfinancing, self-build construction, local economic development for small businesses, gender issues, training in different fields, particularly construction, and technology. Following the first Gaza war, which is Operation Cast-led, I was contacted by the ILO with a specific request of implementing a labor-generating project for Gaza, specifically in repairing housing, if possible. I looked into what we might be able to do, and of course, the strictly enforced embargo on materials importation to Gaza was going to make things extremely difficult. How do you build with little wood, nothing but small bits of scrap steel, and above all, no cement? Cement has become so omnipresent in modern construction that while it is possible to do some things without it, to do without it completely is almost unimaginable. There is lots and lots of cement rubble in Gaza, but it needs a binder to act as an aggregate for concrete, so once the roadbed grades had been dealt with, there wasn't much use for all that rubble. Having grown up myself in a small adobe house in the California desert, built by settlers by their own means, earth construction is always somewhere in the back of my mind. With that idea, I took off to Gaza, thinking of implementing an earth block training program because this was the unique building material available in the country, making do with what you have. With the assistance of the Technical University in Gaza City, we used some basic geological data to locate sources of appropriate clay soils that could be used in making bricks, and with simple tests, we confirmed the feasibility. Through local inquiry, I got in touch with two exceptional partners who could make this project happen. Emad El Khaldi, a creative Gaza entrepreneur who was always ready to take on a new adventure, and Rashid Al-Ruzi, a Gaza-trained architect who had worked as a student on the realization of several structures making partial use of earth blocks in traditional adobe format. With them, I had a team who could implement the project for a series of small refugee shelters. Let's have a look at what it means to use earth in construction. If you have been in the main pavilion, you have seen the wall at Martin Rauch's exhibit, the sign stating that over half the world's population lives or works in a building made of earth. This is astounding, but true. Because even in Europe, up until the 20th century hegemony of reinforced concrete, earth in its myriad forms was used in rural and vernacular architecture in the form of pisé or rammed earth, or adobe, combined with wooden beams as horizontal load-bearing elements. It seemed for Gaza that the most appropriate modern form of earth construction would be realized through compressed earth blocks, as we've seen from TerraBlock, where mechanical pressure is used via a simple hand press to ensure the bonding and standard format of a building block made of earth. For this, we can thank François Cointreau, a genial French engineer and architect from the time of the French Revolution at the end of the 18th century. This is the method we retain to ensure the viability of the project in Gaza. There were many obstacles to overcome. The first objection among the potential beneficiaries: we don't have enough earth in Gaza. Where will we grow our vegetables? The reply is, of course, we can use inorganic clay soils, not topsoil, to make earth blocks. And the volume of the soil for each house is relatively small. As Salma mentioned in her presentation, Hassan Fatih said it's all about the volume, all about the space, not the walls. A second objection: earth houses are primitive. Our impoverished ancestors lived in them. They fell apart and are ugly. Well, the answer: just have a look at what can be done. We can show examples of contemporary structures in earth. If you were here for the Hassan Fatih play at the opening of the Salon, you remember the argument between the Egyptian architect striving to be modern by using reinforced concrete and the foreign architect who argued for the beauty and good sense of traditional, indigenous, vernacular architecture and design. This is an ongoing battle. Third objection: we can't build high. Gaza tradition has parents adding floors to buildings to accommodate generations, and many now live in apartment blocks. Well, that's true for the moment, at least in Gaza terms, but also as we've seen in Yemen and other places. And with enough training and practice, we can build multi-story buildings in earth block as well. Another major obstacle: the teams of civil engineers in Gaza, working with the agencies, were all raised and trained on reinforced concrete, and not many of them were interested in upgrading their skills to include earth block. The general consensus was that mud construction was dirty, uncertain, and unsafe. We were going to have to start a serious campaign of persuasion to convince them that this was a serious option. We got together with Imad and Rashid and located an old Sinva Ram press that you can see in the photo, and got to work showing that it was in fact possible. With my brick here in hand, I took and I laid it on the desk of the UNRWA director, John King, who had initially resisted the idea, but on seeing the result, he gave his benediction, and we loaded all the engineers into a bus and took them to a prototype construction where they could understand where we were all going. There is a special problem related to building with a single unique material. Earth blocks in the form of CEBs, or compressed earth blocks then, have an excellent compression coefficient, meaning that you can press very hard on them and they won't break. Under traction, however, they don't hold together at all. This is the quality of reinforced concrete. To an architect, this means that the structures must be built using compression only. Again, as a resonance with the biennial this year, you will see the compression structures of Block Studio in the Arsenale. In earth block construction, without wood or reinforced concrete for horizontal structures, we only use 3 different forms for spanning space. We use the vault for two-dimensional spanning, for monodimensional, three-dimensional span. We use the vault. Did I say vault before? I meant the arch. The vault for 3 dimensions, and for omnidimensional spans, if you could call it that, we use the dome. That's the vocabulary you have. The geometrically inclined among you may realize that an arch extruded through space becomes a vault, and an arch rotated in space becomes a dome. Of course, the condition we were given was that these were temporary structures for refugees. The goal was to lift the embargo and get back to building in concrete, and the structures had to be inexpensive. We looked around a bit and saw that there were original Hassan Fatih refugee shelters that had the characteristics we need. So we developed a plan to use the minimum number of blocks to build 62 square meters or 80 square meter houses, depending on the size of the family and the number of generations. Just have a quick look here as a little nod of the head, a tip of the hat to Hassan Fatih, who you've heard about over the last few evenings, of course, and an image of a house that's about the size of what we're looking at, that I've borrowed from Leila's blog, I think. So, from Nugorma. And we didn't actually know about it at the time, but we came across later on unbuilt Palestinian refugee houses for Gaza in a proposal by Hassan Fatih. And miracle of miracles, with the several different options for spanning space we were talking about, he was composing with the similar kinds of resources. So I put the team to work, and we came up with some very simple plans using these same ideas, the arch, the vault, and the dome, repeated so that it could be learned, the dimensions could be assimilated, and the workers could produce them without too much difficulty. Of course, starting out with things like this, the simplest basic height is passing a doorway, and so that has to be integrated, and once we work from there, the structures get taller and taller. But we are trying to limit the number of bricks, to limit the number of bricks necessary for each house. There's a sort of a scheme of progression of the spaces as they would be used in building the houses. Now, we talked about the engineers before, and they had to be trained to take it all very seriously, which they now do, I'm happy to admit. For the training, we enrolled Hochparterre from Grenoble, who have a tremendous amount of experience in training programs for earthworks, and they did an excellent job convincing the unconvinced. Here we have some views of a typical course of engineers who are used to building in reinforced concrete. And as you can imagine, they're a difficult public to convince. Earth blocks were not a popular subject. But by working through it bit by bit with demonstrations and trials and testing, we got even the most hardened reinforced concrete engineers to go along with the program. The young lady in the center is Rashid's wife, who is an architect and designer as well, and she helped with the instruction in the courses. And there were some younger engineers who were also more readily involvable in the whole program. So you can see some of the testing as it was going on, making bricks out of different materials and different mixes, and trying to be as scientific about it as possible to best convince the engineers. We put them together on the Sinver rams as well, making blocks. And as you can see, there was even a little industrial espionage going on. I don't know if that was to try and reproduce that at home, or if it was to send a postcard to a loved one about how hard they were working. So, from there we went on to actually training site foremen and construction workers, lots of unemployed masons who were going to be repurposed for using mud block, or we call them mud block just to simplify, but of course then these are the compressed earth blocks, which are much more like what they're used to. So there was a lot less concern in training them to do their job than it was training the engineers. But we put teams together making blocks, leaving them to cure, and teams for building the houses. But first thing we had to do was put our production line in place. So, amazingly enough, we managed to find enough scrap metal around Gaza to prototype and build, or copy basically, some of the Sinver rams with little bits of improvement. So that was getting metal workers involved and welders involved in making the means of production. Now, some of you who know earth block know that there are lots of other fancier ways of making earth block, but this is really the old classic hippie style 1968 South America revolutionary earth block production, and it's still great. Even in the south of France today, you can find somebody who can drag one of these out of a barn and rent it to you for a few months to build your house. So they did a really great job making these things, and we wanted as many of them as possible because, again, the point was to put people to work. There is an old Adobe saying that one person can't build one house, but 10 people can build 10 houses, and this is also true for CEBs, or compressed earth blocks. Nothing is ever easy, but we managed to commission these new block presses. And then we had teams extracting and transporting clay. We put teams together mixing. Now this is a photo not of the usual way of mixing, because we had some big bin mixers as well, which were much quicker and much more efficient for homogeneous mixing of soils and sand, and clay and sand. But since power outages are so frequent in Gaza, the teams never missed a beat. Whenever the electricity would stop, they'd just start mixing right on the floor and keep going with production. And again, we can multiply these teams to have as many as we needed for as many number of work sites as we needed. So now we have teams producing block as well all at the same time. And it was actually lots of fun. They would even get involved in races to see who could produce more blocks than the other ones. So there's a lot of good spirit going on. Other people are stacking the blocks to let them cure, let them dry for about 28 days was our curing time, as we were using a little bit of lime in the mix to help it be a bit more resistant. I'm sure Rodrigo will appreciate that and knows a lot more about that than I do. But that seemed to be the best solution from what we tried. Cement would have been an ideal solution, but cement was neither available. A few sacks would come through the tunnels every now and then, but its use was frowned upon by the international agencies, because that was encouraging a black market, and so very little cement actually made its way into anything. Let's see. We also wanted to have an ecological approach to our delivery and keep a low carbon footprint, And that fit in very well in Gaza because we had a transport means that used a renewable resource and provided a renewable product as well at the exhaust end to be used in the fields. So they were happy with the ecological footprint of the operation, even though, again, that wasn't the principal goal. Then, well, we had our first client, and this is again a resonance with what Manuel was talking about this afternoon. We've got people living in some of the standard UN tents that have been provided, and well, the conditions weren't particularly agreeable or healthy. Especially as winter was closing in on us. This was only our first pilot project, but well, this isn't, the photo is not our pilot project, but this is the way people were living. So, and nevertheless, they were always very welcoming, brought us in for tea and bread and a small meal, but this is where families are living. All over the place, not just in Gaza, but there were quite a few in Gaza. So the kitchen facilities. And we were able to begin working on the structures themselves. And I'll just take you through a few pictures that show the steps and the means of working. Again, starting with the arches, built over a form. I don't know if you saw the film about the form used for the compression structure in the Arsenal, but it was a little more complicated than the forms we were able to piece together in Gaza. But these did their job and they were reusable. So people hard at work. The mortar is actually the same material as the blocks. It's just mixed up on the site. And used directly to fill in between the brickwork. Makes for a very homogeneous structure. And then, of course, once it's always a magic moment when the formwork is taken away from the arch. It's kind of magical, really. So, work on the houses continues as they go up. They'll be plastered, rendered with an earth finish on the inside as well. We've got Rashid here, who's taking the client on a tour of his house. I don't know if he's a client or a beneficiary, but he was very involved and very happy, and his family was providing labor for the job as well. If you've ever had the chance to see a dome going up, it's a very impressive bit of work as well. Lots of teamwork involved, and it seems to hold by some sort of magic as well as it goes up. There's a compass arm that gives the right distance from the center, the focus of the dome as it goes up. And if you keep putting blocks in there and you can get the circles done, they hold. Finishing out the dome, the last few touches. And of course, once you finish the first one, the second one has to go up, and then the next one, and the next one. So it's quite a lot of work, but the houses each took less than 3 months to build, all by hand, including the foundations. So you can see the kitchen conditions are a little more pleasant than the tent-based kitchen. And getting close to move-in day. And then finally, this makes me think of the transition. Several things that have been mentioned, going from a tent to an earth block house, And Leila was mentioning the potential for decay, quoting Ruskin about the decay of architecture and how that had its own role in the process. The problem, as you can see with reinforced concrete, is the problem in the miracle of reinforced concrete is that it doesn't just disappear by itself very quickly. So there's still a lot of work to be done that has nothing to do with housing anybody, but just clearing away debris. Once again, I'd just like to point out that this is all about pragmatic practicality. This is a story of how we housed some people in Gaza whose home had been destroyed, but it wasn't a solution to all of Gaza's problems. These are modest acts of architecture, but I think that every act of building represents a kind of belief in the future. If we can put that future into the hands of the people using it, needing it, even people living in rubble, and we give them an occupation, the daily act of putting one block on top of another is also architecture and making a dwelling. And once they do that, they can begin experimenting on their own. And many people who have done various forms of earth architecture will tell you that there is a magic in putting your hands in the mud. And I agree that there is a special feeling. Maybe it even brings a little bit of joy. What we're looking at here offers no particular compromises because there weren't any compromises available. Provides nevertheless an opportunity to take action and build. This is a project that's caught in a crossfire between politics and necessity, maybe also between oppression and empowerment. This was one of the few possible responses, making do with what we have, modest, not flashy. There might be other things that can be done now, better, faster, but at that time it was important just to build shelter as an act of resistance. I will close with another quote from Alejandro Aravena, the director of the Biennale. We shouldn't blame the harshness of the constraints for our incapacity to do our job against scarcity, inventiveness. Thank you. Just to restate what was done by this project, it provided employment, it provided housing, it provided local economic development because the money that was injected into training and hiring masons, building equipment, all stayed in the local economy. And it provided sustainability because those earth blocks themselves can be recycled or reused if necessary. And I repeat, this was only considered a temporary solution because, as Mr. Ging, the head of the UNRWA, insisted, the solution is the end of the embargo. So, final image, it seems that everywhere that people build in earth block and build arches, they always have to do this and take a selfie at the end of the construction. In Gaza, like in anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill, for this presentation. I suppose that the few people in the public have questions to ask to you, and please don't hesitate. Salma, please. So we have another mic.
Dying to ask. Brilliant presentation. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how heartening it is. It's one of the most refreshing projects one has looked at, in as far as I don't know if it's fair to call them refugees, or they are the population of Gaza, irrespective. They are Palestinians, so it's very difficult to call them refugees. But you did use that term, didn't you? Yes. But that's not the question. I don't want to digress, sorry. I just want to say that you might think it's a very small and it's a very modest contribution, but I think it's a great breakthrough. I think it's a breakthrough that is very, very important, because it serves as a very, very important prototype, to show how important Earth architecture is, how resourceful you have been with training the engineers, who are the hardest people to train. I'm talking about, sorry, I'm not talking about engineers like Rodrigo here. I'm talking about engineers in our part of the world who are stuck and fixed on all of this. So I think it's a much more important project, or you're either being extremely self-effacing and modest, and I think I'd be very happy to write a petition to Mr. McCain, is his name? The UN person.
Mr. Ging. Oh, he's no longer there.
Oh,
but,
that's a pity. But I think it's very important that this project creates a precedent for refugee housing. And I recall at one point that I saw there was a documentary on Gaza on BBC, and it did cover that some of the inhabitants have started to build with compressed blocks. And I remember looking at the part construction and thinking, wow, this is Hassan Fathy style, but why who is doing it? You know, who are the people doing it? Again, we fall back into that Orientalist trap of architects without architecture. The question I have is very, very small, and then we'll continue this later, because I think this should be a prototype for building for Syrian refugees in Baalbek, where there is tradition. It's not very sophisticated, of doing bricks, and it's something that would be fantastic. You have set a model which I hope can be followed by bringing Crater to train these people, by working with the ILO, because it is a very political issue, as we all know, of course. But the question is, when did this exactly happen? How long were you there? And are you still involved? Or was this just a prototype? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Salma, for giving the opportunity. Yes, no, I didn't talk about the follow-on to this project. I didn't want to go on too long for you. But in fact, my involvement in this project was a total of about 6 weeks, because that's what the budget was for me to be involved in this. So I was concerned with getting as much started as possible. And while we were able to get the first, actually there were 3 pilot houses built, this first one and then 2 very similar to it, over a several-month period. And then from there was a 2-phase project to build twice 60 houses. So a total of 120 houses were built using this same basic model with by people who had been trained over the course of this project. So it is a nice kind of effect, and that was really the intention, was to get the ball rolling, as it were, and get as much going. And well, let me, I just also, we had hoped perhaps to have Rashid Al-Rouzi on Skype tonight to talk to us. Saturday night from his office at the ILO was not really going to be an option, and that's where he had the only reliable internet connection. So he nevertheless sent me, I mean, I can't say I'm proud of him, but I'm very pleased with what he's done, because he has gone on as well, and he built another larger structure, a women's center, a women's craft center, in conjunction with his wife, who collaborated on this with him, Gaza. And so they've built this new structure, which is Not entirely earth block, because there are concrete slabs involved in it as well. But I think he's taken the techniques of dome building, and he's put them to use in a mixed structure, which is actually addressing one of the concerns about being able to build in height. So I'm really happy that they're able to go on and do more and experiment and continue with something that was just a small project launched over a few months. And just to come back to the first part of your question, many people in Gaza are in fact, they have the status of refugees because they came from other parts of Palestine to establish themselves in Gaza, and they're not originally from Gaza, over 1 million people. So they have a refugee status, which gives them certain privileges with the UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Works Agency for Palestine. So there is a difference, and I understand your observation, but they are in fact refugee beneficiaries.
I wasn't aware of that. Thank you. And the date that you
this was, the Operation Cast Lead was the end of 2008 to January 2009. I went initially in July, and 2010. 2009, you're right. 2009. And the project was developed through the end of the year in 2009. The second phase of the phase of 60 houses was in 2010.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you so much, Bill, for that presentation. It was really inspiring and really impressive what you managed to do there. It's a really simple question, but I was wondering, after the houses were built, what were the reactions of the people? Because you said that first they were really like, oh my God, it's so archaic and primitive and we don't want to live there. But in the end, the result is absolutely stunning. So did it convince people around, or are they still convinced that, well, concrete architecture is best, or?
I think it had a part in slowly convincing people, but just like anywhere else, people take a while to come around to the idea. But certainly for this family, going from a tent to a small, decently built house that wasn't too rough looking, I think that was a big step in convincing other people to move in that direction. And of course, people like to look over the fence and learn a little bit about what's going on and maybe give it a try themselves. So I don't know if, Salma, the show you saw was before or after, but there are other attempts, and some of the farmers who built in basic sun-dried mud block, it can be pretty rough and even dangerous. But we were trying to train masons to build safely with earth block and to know when it's going up in a safe fashion. That was an important factor. And I would also like to say thank you very much for your kind remarks, but it really was a team effort, and the people on the site are mostly the ones responsible for that. I'm their messenger to bring this back to you and tell you about what was able to happen down there.
Thank you, Bill. I would like to know if you have apparently a lot of contacts in the United Nations. Is there other organizations than ILO getting interested in these technologies? Because there is definitely a future and a lot to do. That's the simple question.
There is a lot to do. There's certainly a lot of earth block, compressed earth block that's used in Africa already, where it's fairly widespread. And there are other agencies that work with earth block. UNDP sometimes, yes. Also, UN Habitat has some programs for construction with earth block as well. But of course, ILO, building houses is not their business. So you kind of have to take it from the labor point of view to get them to go into it. And they will. And they understand that it's a big economic sector. Nearly every country, the construction industry in some form or the other is one of the biggest sectors of the economy. So you can talk them into it.
Because I have the feeling that all these organizations, and you hear a lot about NGOs trying to implement these simple technologies, everyone works by himself and thinks he's alone in this struggle. But at the end of the day, there are many people getting interested in these technologies. And even within the UN, different agencies probably do the same job. And there might be a bit of a better communication to do. I don't know if it's your point of view.
Well, absolutely. I can't really speak for the international agencies because I'm only one of their foot soldiers every now and then when they ask me. But there's more and more effort being put into creating multi-agency programs where UNDP works with UN Habitat, which works with UNRWA, which works with ILO, and they all try and coordinate their projects so that they make more sense. Because it's true, I mean, there have been some terrible examples in the past of agencies working at cross purposes. And then, you know, the term humanitarian circus is used very often when there's a catastrophe in particular. And once the NGOs get involved as well, there can be a lot of difficulty coordinating events. I mean, I was in one experience in Indonesia after the tsunami where we had a whole training program going for building and microfinance and all kinds of things to go into the program together. And another ONG, which I won't name, just came along with a kind of a cash distribution program because they said, well, we've got, you know, all this donor cash to get rid of. And so they just started passing it out in the village. And everybody who was scheduled for a training program and a little work program and a job afterwards and all that just said, oh, no, thanks, we don't really need it. We just got some money from the other guys. And they all had new mopeds and new cell phones, and our project just went down the drain. I mean, how do you convince somebody, you know, anyway, that's we just voted in Switzerland on a minimum basic, but it's got nothing to do with that. I'm sure that would be a good idea. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. It's amazing work. Really, congratulations. Fantastic to see it. I have a few questions, a few small questions. One very technically, and I'm embarrassed to ask this as an architect, how does it hold up in the rain? Does it need any protection?
That's a good question. It's obviously a very delicate one. And compressed earth blocks can be very, very resistant. Well, I will again refer to my favorite engineer here, Rodrigo, who can tell us about that. But no, what we did in Gaza, fortunately there's not a lot of rain, but it's not a wet climate. It's fairly desert climate, but it is near the sea. The important thing is to study the water runoff of the roof so it's controlled and doesn't start just burning a canyon down through the bricks and the walls or anything. There's a little loss, but if you control it with the thickness of the bricks, it's not a problem over a few years. It does require maintenance, but it can always be done over with another rendering of earth rendering. What we were working on with Emad El-Kaldi, who is the entrepreneur, and Rashid, the architect, was developing a kind of an acacia gum finish that we could put on the roof to help reduce the damage from water. And that would involve sort of condensing, making a sort of a tea out of acacia, kind of a gum tree, and making this sticky mix that we could sort of paint over the domes to help reduce erosion.
And the second question, and I have to start with a disclaimer almost, because first of all, the question will sound weird and it will sound incredibly cynical, and it's not meant to be cynical. But does Israel know about these projects? Do you know how they react? If they know, maybe as a little excursion, I mentioned earlier when we are standing in the Western Sahara Pavilion that I'm quite interested about these dilemmas and also kind of contradictions, where, for example, the refugee camp was run so efficiently that it never came to a political solution. It actually maybe the goodness of the architecture prevented a political solution. Could it be that Israel is actually quite happy about this because they have another reason not to lift the embargo? Look here, it does actually work without the embargo. Without lifting the embargo, and again, the disclaimer: this is not meant to be a kind of a cynical.
No, I understand. No, I understand completely. That's not at all cynical. That's a very realistic question. Israel knew perfectly well because I had to go to Gaza through Israel. Mostly, they had to give me a visa so I could come back from Gaza, which is very difficult to obtain, but. That's what I had to do through the UN. Israel knows every step I take while I'm in Gaza. Actually, it's all very well controlled, and I don't know if it's via my cell phone or via whatever means, but I'm sure that there were no drones that were going to be working anywhere in my vicinity or anyone else from the international organizations. I think the Israelis are very, very competent technologically from that front. So obviously they knew what was happening. I think the objection that UNRWA had to us building with earth block as a kind of an act of resistance was officially frowned upon because, like I said, they wanted the embargo lifted, but practically there was no way we're going to build 75,000 housing units out of earth blocks in Gaza. So it was a small effort in a certain direction and for a certain population, and that could, that would bring a certain amount of civic pride, perhaps, to some of the people involved. But I don't think it was going to make a significant difference in either lifting or leaving the embargo.
I think we have this afternoon, we had a very interesting tour about, working in a very specific ground. You have been working now in also very complicated environment and setting. What was the cultural implications of your work in the sense of, as you mentioned quite clearly, you came in a certain circumstance, you come from, let's say, from a Western point of view, but also from a Western style of living, of being able to travel, of doing a lot of things. How did that work on the spot? I mean, it's always all these questions also that have been asked about refugee, not refugees. I think it's all very touchy issues. So how did that influence your work, or how did you deal on the spot with it?
I've always been personally very sensitive, I hope. I hope I haven't offended anyone along the way. But as you pointed out, because I've had the privilege of traveling in different places in Syria and Asia, and so anyway, the practical answer is that everywhere we went and everything that's been proposed always has to be approved or even assimilated by the people involved. Ideally, it should be their idea and not mine. I don't even want it to be my idea. It's their idea. That's what they want to do. They accept it and assume the consequences. So in that way, that can happen very easily by setting up consultative committees in villages, and everybody wants their word to say. And if that's managed by a person from the village, it usually goes very well. So that's the short answer.
Sorry, one more.
Oh, sorry.
Going back a little bit, sorry, from political to the technique. What did ILO do, or to whom belong these machines at the end of the process and the project? Because we know the importance of capacity building, and I imagine, there are some masons there that have, entrepreneurship, and I imagine these guys must have thought, wow, there is an interesting activity to do here, to continue producing blocks as long as the embargo is there, and building a house for people. Is this a movement that could be felt, or are these machines abandoned?
Oh no, the machines are not at all abandoned. They're actually, the first round of machines were actually built with a kind of a grant from the ILO, and I think they're still in service through the contractor who received the grant. I think other contractors later in the big phase of 60 housing units were also given a small grant. The ILO considering that a few $1,000s to build some brick presses is a worthwhile investment in the local economy, and one that will stay. Those kind of machines will last a long time. So the idea is that's usually where either a loan or a grant comes into play to make those machines immediately available.
Bill, I just wanted to continue the conversation that Rodrigo started on the ILO and the UNDP, and to say that why this is very interesting is that in the case of Gaza, where there's an embargo on cement, and God knows why there's an embargo on cement. Why is there an embargo on cement? So that people don't build?
Well, I think the official answer, I'm not involved in the intricacies of the political
No, but
questions.
you don't know. We don't know why cement.
Well, I think the official answer is that because concrete gets used for building tunnels, number one,
okay.
also gets used for protecting Gaza missile launching sites, or any number of things. Yeah. Why concrete is a dangerous substance.
Yeah. All right, fine.
But mostly it's just annoying not to have any concrete available.
When there was an embargo on Iraq, if you remember, there was sanctions for 13 years. Pencils were part of the embargo because they were made of lead. In a world that had what were they called, these weapons, the weapons,
mass destruction.
Yeah, in a country that was supposed to have weapons of mass destruction, lead was. But to go back to the important query about the UNDP and the role of that, you're right about the fact that all these agencies get involved where and when they are placed. In the case of UNDP, there's a very important precedence that after Nahr al-Barid camp was completely destroyed due to a war that took place there and bombardments, etc. UNDP was allowed to come with a project to rebuild the camp and to finance it, and they got an Aga Khan award for that. They either got the award or were shortlisted. So there is precedence there in construction, but this is very, very rare, because as we were discussing earlier today, after seeing the West Sahara pavilion, is that case is also unique in one sense because they are allowed to build. And in the case of the Palestinian refugees, which has been going on since 1948, they're not allowed to build. Nobody wants them to build, whether basically in Lebanon, they don't want them to build. In Jordan, they're allowed to build. So there are schools being constructed now for the Syrian refugees in Jordan, like the Palestinians kind of integrated with the Jordanians. But in Lebanon, where we have at least 2 million Syrian refugees at the moment, and it's a very, very pressing case and issue, apart from the Palestinians who live in their ad hoc, miserable camp situations because they are miserable, overcrowded, with no infrastructure, no sewage, but in this case, where one is trying to build for the Syrian refugees, the only possible involvement is going to be through the UN, because they are the people who are now most active in financing. So it's just a question of logistics and how to get in touch with the right people. And I think this might open a new avenue in construction using bricks.
Okay, Salma, I think we will close the discussion now with Bill. It was really very interesting. Thank you so much. And now I would like to call Dominique Fleury here, because as I told you before, we will go on with the film she has made, and there is maybe 1 minute for installation now of the material, and she disappeared. Where is she? Okay, now she's coming. Okay.
So I like to. You hear me, or is it okay? Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. So I like to thank Leila El Wakil to invite me to this Biennale of Architecture, the Salon. I am so artist from Geneva, and I will explain to you what we will see. It will be a little bit interactive evening. So the main focus of this June Salon is related to the earth, but in the context of refugee, I will talk more about the other meaning of this word in French, which is the land, and not any land as a Palestinian one. So the land associated to the word Palestine is fully charged, and so much has been said and shown. It's difficult to add something. So when I visited that symbolic part of the world, I was more interested to find out how the people managed to express themselves in that context. So many Palestinians are listening to people talking for them, about them, answering questions, posing for tourist camera, or interacting with artists coming to visit the problem. By the time other people talk for them or about them, their land is on the verge to disappear and become, in a way, we can say, attraction park for tourists, NGO, or photographer. When one is restrained by the physical space, remains the mental one. So I was happy to meet people who are fighting with their art, imaginary, and the mind in this context. For them, sometimes words become meaningless, so I decided to do a series of videos about the relation to their space and different kind of borders, and by telling speechless narrative just by image, frame, and sound. Each protagonist stands to build his own reality, to defy his own world, to defy the reality. So I met a Palestinian artist who studied architecture previously in Paris, and his atelier is in an old Palestinian house in Jerusalem, close to Bethlehem. Staying in that old stone house, surrounded by olive tree, with sound of shepherd and cats, I felt suddenly out of time, out of tourism, out of business, out of NGO, out of military, and I could feel and imagine what used to be that land, that house, that landscape before the conflict. So the short video you will see is called Hors Champ d'Olivier, and it's the first of the series. We follow a painter in the valley of olive tree. He walks with his easel, observe, and archives the ruin like a painter before the invention of photography. He chooses what he wants to see, and his action of painting is a kind of resistance through memory. After that projection, we will have a Skype discussion from Jerusalem with this artist who played in the film, Benji Boadjan, and he will present his work that he's doing since 2009 in the valley, called Temporary Arena. And I will show some photographs, and he will explain about his relation to the valley and its future. After that, after Jerusalem, we will see a video from Yarmouk camp in Damascus, Syria. And it's the biggest camp for Palestinian Syrian, which was built in 1957. This video is called Diary Under Siege, and is based on the diary of a Palestinian man called Mohammed Abu al-Majad, who decided to film since the entrance of Daesh in the camp, the 1st of April, every day, a moment, a meeting, an event with his mobile phone to share this time and this memory with the people who live and left the camp. So I made this movie with Moaz Sabar, who also came from Yarmouk to Switzerland in 2013, and you can ask a question in the end of the projection to him. So this man wanted to keep and share how the people try to fight in this situation where this camp is destroyed, and how they also fighting to continue their normal life and reconstruct the camp. because a lot of them have left the camp. A huge number have left to become a second-time refugee in Europe, in America, or Jordan, as you know, or Lebanon. And so this affects also the camp and its memory. Even though the camp usually for us evokes something temporary, in this case it's become a part of Damascus city since 1957. And the name of the street like Haifa, Sauphoria, which are all Palestinian city or village, recall the constant link that these people have with their homeland and their dream to return to Palestine. But the second and third generation live on a dream to return in the country they usually have seen only in the black and white picture of the grandparents. So Palestine is a utopia for those who can only imagine it. To stay in the camp, as say Mohamed Abou-Majed, is a kind of a resistance. The diaspora will dissolve the unity and the strength of the ideology that was created in Yarmouk camp and will affect the memory of sharing a common dream. Cynically, they will have finally the chance to go to Palestine, maybe as future European citizens, to visit their old land like tourists and come back with a picture of it. So I will start now with a movie called Hors Champ d'Olivier. So now I will call the painter that you see in the movie, which is waiting for us, and ask him some question. I will ask him some question, and then, of course,
Allô?
Allô, Benji? Alors...
Ouais, tu m'entends?
Oui, je t'entends. Alors, ce que je vais faire, Enfin, pour l'instant, on ne te voit pas, mais si tu veux, tu peux mettre la vidéo, mais en fait, là, je vais présenter les photos, et puis on va juste entendre le son, puis après, ben, tu pourras, si tu veux, mettre la vidéo. Voilà. Bonjour, Benji. Voilà. Donc c'est Benji Bouldin, l'artiste que vous avez aperçu. Ah, sorry, I'm sorry. Yes. So here's Benji and Bouldin that you saw in the movie. And to start this discussion, I will show some picture, and Benji will present more in detail the work and the valley, and we will listen to him, and after that we will have him again on Skype, so if you have questions you could ask him directly. Is it okay, Benji? Allô? Allô? Okay. Is it a good... Benji? 1 second. Is it a good Wi-Fi? I will see. Sorry? I have good connection, actually, so quit. Okay. So, sorry for that. Quit Istanbul, would you like to... Sorry?
Try to deactivate your camera.
Ah, okay. Deactivate this? Okay. I don't know if it's because me. It seems okay. It seems that this. Okay. I will not take the. Okay. Okay.
Hello, yes, do you hear me now?
Yes, sorry, Benji. I realized after that you didn't heard. So here are the audience. Do you see us or?
No, I don't see you, but maybe it's best without a video because of the connection.
Okay. So I will start with a presentation of the photo, and so to ask you a question, and then when it's finished, the audience can ask you a question, and we will put on the video on Skype. Is it okay?
Okay, great.
Okay. So, as I say, Benji Bouldin is an artist who previously studied architecture. Or maybe you want to present yourself, Benji, before we start, in 2 words? Or...
Okay, I can present myself quickly. I'm a visual artist. I'm based in Jerusalem. I'm actually trained as an architect. So this is basically it.
Okay. So we will start to see some picture from the valley where you have been working since many years, like about since 2009, you said. And I want to ask you, so if you can tell us about your relation to its valley and to its ruin. So now we see the first ruin, and that you saw in the movie, and one painting, so you can start.
So I will start, okay, so about the valley. And basically, I grew up in Bethlehem, so this valley is part of my childhood landscape. And I moved back in 2009 to Jerusalem. I was in Paris studying. And I got fortunate and lucky enough to have a studio just next to the... So this valley is basically sited in between Jerusalem and Bethlehem, in between the Green Line, that is basically was the border from 48 to 67, for those who know a little bit about the history of Jerusalem. In 67, after the war, it got annexed. And the valley is in between the Green Line and the wall, separation wall that was built in 2002, 2003. So this kind of was a bit of no man's land, buffer zone, but slowly, I mean, the urban sprawl of Jerusalem started. It's part of the Great Jerusalem Plan, which is basically an expansion of the municipal boundaries decided in 67 with the master plan. So what we know today as settlements of Jerusalem, they are in this boundary.
Sorry,
So
I'm sorry. Because after we will speak about the situation of the valley, I think maybe if we speak first about the ruins, as we're seeing the ruin and your painting, and then we will go back for sure about the situation now because we have the picture. So now I'm showing the drawings and the photos. So if you want to speak about what are the ruins,
So the ruins, basically, they are field houses, those ruins. So, I mean, they belong to the pre-modern era, in some ways, when the culture was much more agrarian in this region. And so the field houses, basically, the inhabitants, they lived in a city not far from their fields. And they would go on summer or during olive harvest to the fields to work, and they would build those field houses where they store food, sleep there, etc. So this is basically to explain those ruins. In Arabic, they call them kusur or manatir. It really depends on who is giving the name to these ruins. Kusur means a castle, basically. So one can imagine this is the castle of a farmer, more or less. But city dwellers, they call it manatir, so they have a different terminology for it.
So you said that this ruin, actually, they are domestic space, they are the monument of the common people, and this work are homage to rural culture, which has been elided. So can you tell us a little bit about that culture and why is it important to you?
Well, a monument, it's first of all, they are not monuments. It's me as an artistic act to make out of monuments. So basically this culture is disappearing, the agrarian culture, because of, we all know, modernity, globalization, industrial era. So in a sense, when I started painting in this valley and documenting this valley, I was looking at representations of landscape in Palestine. And most representations are done by either Orientalist adventurers who came here in the end of the 19th century. So you have this kind of paintings of what we would perceive as monuments today, more important buildings, religious buildings, historical buildings, etc. Then the Palestinian artists represented the landscape quite a lot after the Nakba, after 48, and it's mostly a nostalgic kind of representation of the landscape. So, and also so I was trying to position myself in the way we represent landscape in painting in Palestine, basically. So this is why I started painting them. And why it's a monument, because the first step of my project was basically to archive all the remaining ruins in the valley. So archiving, a question that comes into term is heritage, patrimony, basically. So I perceive this as a heritage that's worthy of preservation. It won't be preserved in the future. We'll see that later, I think. I understood Dominique wants to speak about the political situation later. But for me, it was a means to kind of preserve this landscape before it disappears.
Yes. Now we will see a little bit the picture about the context of the valley, so you can maybe tell us the geographical situation and of the valley, like you started before. Maybe it will be more clear with some picture. So we have the...
Yes. So as I said, the valley is in between the green line and the wall. So all this is annexed territory in 1967 into the New Jerusalem municipal boundaries. In 1967 or 1968, there came out a master plan of the Great Jerusalem, which basically projects neighborhood to the borders, to the new borders, and then throughout time, the gap in between those new neighborhoods is filled, and the whole city is unified and connected. So what you see in that picture, in those pictures, I guess, is a settlement of Har Homa, which is built on the top of a hill. So this is a projected neighborhood. And now the whole gap will be filled. It's about 2 kilometers to the urban fabric, to the border of the city, basically. So these 2 kilometers are going to be filled with urban sprawl. And so the valley is now caught in between all of this, basically. In between, on one side, the valley continues into Bethlehem, but over there it's oversaturated with buildings already. So it has been, and it is in the process of being demolished. And on the Israeli side, basically, it's just, it's looming, basically. I seen the master plan a few months ago, so on top of the valley, there's going to be about 18 floor towers, and to the bottom of the valley, there'll be like 7, 8 floor residential blocks. So basically, within, I don't know, a few years, they're going to start construction over there.
Okay, I just show now the last picture from the context. I wanted to come back a little bit to your work and the fact that you paint so in situ, black and white, and you don't include the contemporary landscape in your painting. Can you just tell us a little bit about your artistic choices and its connection to the collective memory?
Well, as I said earlier, this was really the first part of my project, was to archive, document the valley. So I decided, there's this whole thing in this country of a fragmented territory, and I thought the only way to get a view that can resemble a little bit what it was would be to fragment basically the frame. So, and as part of a work, those are not paintings alone, they are part of a larger installation. And so the idea in the installation is to reconstruct the valley as a labyrinth, and to reconstruct it as a labyrinth, and so you walk and stroll in between, so you don't know really where you are, you don't know in what time you are exactly. Now the reason I painted them black and white is because I was also thinking this has to deal with the ruin, and I really didn't want to look at the ruin through this romantic point of view, which is kind of opening up the past and the future, and we as humans feel small in front of the ruin, because the ruin has more problems than that, basically. So I wanted these images to be very neutral and cold, in a sense, and that they don't cry for nostalgia. And so that was kind of the choice of representing it the way they are. Also not drawing every single stone, every single detail, but rendering it a little bit more abstract. Not to realize, basically, to hide and blur the time and space it's been done in, basically. And I paint them in situ because it's also, I position position myself as a visual artist in terms of what is represented, where we are, etc. And I thought it's really interesting to do an archive by painting, because I had never seen that really. And painting in situ, because it's not only the object that I felt like dealing with, it's the atmosphere itself. And the atmosphere is something you can capture when you are inside, in situ. When you take a picture and draw out of a picture, it's more like, for me, a tautological approach. So I didn't want to repeat a picture. And I'm a painter basically, so I didn't want to photograph it either. And also it came in the fact that, so it was presented in the Jerusalem show in 2014, this first part. The Jerusalem show is like the contemporary art festival in Palestine. This is part of a larger festival, which is Columbia International. And the theme was the archive. And when the theme came out and I got selected, I was thinking, okay, we're dealing again with the archive. It's starting to become a trend in contemporary art. So I was thinking that would be quite original to like treat this archive, but in a different way. And also it's paradoxical, you know, work in a very slow pace while the landscape is being demolished in a very fast pace.
Yeah, this is the next question. So the name of your work is called, I mean, the first part, the temporary ruin. And can you just tell us how is that connected to the future of the valley? I'm showing some picture of the street around, even though now I know it changed already, but if you can tell us what is the future of it, about the ruin. Yes.
The temporary ruin, basically, I think in the title it shows my position vis-a-vis the ruin, as I don't see the ruin as opening up permanence, basically. So it's temporary because basically we know what is going to come. It's foreseen what is coming. So that's, I think that's basically the answer, no?
Okay. And you said also that this work was a project, last question of mine, an ironic act of preemptive archaeology. Can you just explain what you mean?
Yeah, so once I was painting in February 2014, and I bumped into the antiquity department. There were 3 people of the antiquity department, the Israeli one, that were running a survey in the valley. And at the same time, they had already started building a highway on the valley. So I asked them, they came to see me, I was painting, it was quite an awkward meeting. And I asked them if they were here because of the highway. And then they answered to me, no, in a few years there is no more valley, basically. So what is interesting, since I'm dealing with heritage, patrimony, landscape that's disappearing, the vernacular, etc., what is interesting is to position myself vis-a-vis what is being done politically in this country, as it's a war on sediments, basically, conflict on traces, what is going on here. And if one looks closely at the Israeli Antiquity Department, they're much more interested in other periods than the Ottoman period, because those, what I didn't say earlier, those ruins, they're dated back to the Ottoman period, so they're not that old, they're 400 years, 300 years old. And which is also the oldest layer that is holding, you know, so you don't really see layers of the Roman period or the Hellenistic period, etc. They are in the sediments. So it's preventive archaeology in the sense that they document it very briefly. They take some pictures, some measurements, put it in a drawer. So I thought that doing this act adds a layer to preservation, and I called it preemptive. It's kind of a game of words, a pun with the word preventive, because of the common policy of preemptive action, basically. So that's the reason I gave it. I mentioned the word preemptive archaeology.
Okay, thank you. I think that I will just see if some people and some architects maybe or any has a question for you. So if you want to put on the video, just for a little bit.
I will do that. Just a second.
Me? Okay.
Okay, now I see you.
Yes, okay. So, if anyone has a question, otherwise we can continue. I will take it like this. Yes. Okay. Yes. So,
No questions?
okay.
I have one, maybe. He can hear me or not? I don't know.
Benji?
Yes.
For you, Benji, is it more an artistic work, an architectural work, a preservation work? What are you exactly doing? Or all of that together, or a political work? Or tell us a sum up.
It is a little bit of everything that you've been saying. I think in contemporary art, we kind of associate a lot of elements and ideas that are mixed with our own experiences. Of course, I'm an architect. I was trained as an architect, and my brother always used to tease me and say to my parents, what happens when you send an artist to an architect school, he ends up drawing buildings. But it's not the only thing I do, really. But in this case, yes, this is only really the first part of the project, and it's very architectural. I've also been collecting objects from the valley for many, many years. So I have very different kinds of objects. And it is, at the end of the day, you know, I don't call it political work, but I think work is political, how to say. And I think in this work it's more to I don't know, like, kind of twist politics a little bit. Not be direct, not be literal in the way I look at politics. And the ruin is a metaphor of Palestine, basically, for me. So coming to that, and I wanted to do a work on Palestine because it's not the only theme I do, basically. But so this is it.
Thank you. Somebody else? Yeah?
Benji, thank you. I appreciate seeing your painting very much. I was wondering if when you work, do you sometimes have an element of project, an architectural project in what you paint?
Dominique, can you repeat? Because I didn't hear exactly.
I'm sorry. I was. Okay. I'm sorry. I was wondering if when you paint, do you sometimes bring an element of an architectural project? Sorry, we're having trouble with this.
Elements of an architect?
An architectural project. Yes. Do you project in what you see a possible building, a future building, a new way of living in the valley?
I've been actually, it's interesting because I did my research thesis in architecture and urban sociology, and a lot of it was about, the main subject was contemporary habitat in Palestine. And yeah, I do myself see a lot of elements in this landscape that we can learn from, basically, in terms of the relationship to the environment and how we build with the environment, in terms of the flora, in terms of the way we treat those hills. Because if you look at the contemporary neighborhood, basically, they totally devastate the landscape. They come with bulldozers and build these humongous terraces with retaining walls that reach 6-8 meters behind. Basically, they flatten up the landscape. So in terms of, like, this is a result of the industrial era and the way we build today. But I think we can look back at this landscape and learn from it. I'm not saying we should copy it because our lives have changed, but we can definitely learn from it. And that and looking, there is more than only the ruins there. There's a lot of interesting things in terms of how the water was distributed, because it's the aqueduct. There's an aqueduct that passes there, and that dates back to the Roman period, and it was refurbished during the Ottoman period, so 1,500 years later. And as I said, the diversity of the flora. In fact, this is a place where there's really a lot of medicinal herbs, different species of trees, different things can grow in that landscape. So when I was doing my research, I was actually thinking how we can fix our contemporary habitat by learning from this kind of environment.
I have a question which maybe just goes in the same direction. There is, if I just look at the work, it could be also a nostalgic work, like you just isolate the past or the reflection of the past to it. What would be an ideal development of? You said now we can learn from this this landscape, but how would you wish this landscape would develop? I mean, if you had the power to say what's going to happen around all these old buildings, all these historical buildings also, what would be the ideal development? What would be the good, how you get around this? If you had could just make a wish, how should it develop?
Like, I will put a bit of a context to what you just said. So there is an institution that refurbishes Ottoman period structures in Palestine. It's called Iraq. And basically, but they only deal with old urban centers. And unfortunately, they can't extend their influence out of these structures. I think they're doing a pretty good job, but there's a tendency of museification, of making patrimony a museum. And now, if I had a wish, because the contemporary habitat in Palestine, basically, which is where most of the people live, which was built in the last 60 years, and the problems in those areas are lack of public space, lack of sewer, cleaning water, etc. All kinds of small details. So my wish would be already just to start a little bit to create public space, but there is the impossibility because of land ownership and indivision of land and all that, and fix basically our water problems and have more green areas, because this is also something that we're doing automatically when we're demolishing. When we want to build, we're demolishing the whole landscape, so we're not preserving anything. So if we can just have a law forbidding of digging too deep into those valleys, digging small terraces and keeping the old topography line terraces that you see in the vernacular landscape, maybe it would already make people live in the environment, not in something ex nihilo. So I would wish for small things, really. Now to fix everything that's going on here is a big question.
So thank you, Beji. I think the public asked all the question now. It was very interesting to hear you and hear your answers.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And,
thank you. Thank you for listening.
And so I say goodbye to Benji and thank you. We can maybe applaud. Bye. And so we will continue shortly with the second film, which is, as I say, based on the diary of a Palestinian man from Yarmouk camp. So it's shot with a mobile phone, and the sound is a little bit. Thomas, we will. So after the projection of this film, as the time is running, Moaz Sabar, which is also from Yarmouk camp, will be here, but maybe we will, I don't know when exactly, and if we have the time after the movie. Otherwise, you can ask him directly questions around the buffet if you want to know more about Yarmouk camp. And he came in Switzerland in 2013. And it's because of him that we have this image from Yarmouk, because as you know, it's not so easy to get. Okay.
شارع اليرموك 4/4/2015. تنظيف ما خلف الصاروخ. هاي فتحي هون. هذا هو الدمار. كب يلا كب. هاي بيت خالي ابو رياض. يا الله هاي اجت قذيفه ثانيه وصاروخ الله العليم. يا رب. فوتوا انضبوا. حملة نظافة في مخيم اليرموك 9/4/2015. نظافة شعبية. يقوم فيها جميع الأهالي والمؤسسات والهيئات. يوم 9/4/2015. الله يعطيك عافية. الله يحفظها. مخيم اليرموك 21/4/2015.
أنا من سكان مخيم اليرموك. كل يوم ساكنة بمنطقة الريزة. كل يوم صرنا أكثر من أسبوع ونحن هلكنا. ونحن بنروح على يلدا من المخيم ليلدا نقطع 3 كيلومتر رايحين جايين. متنا. أنا مريضة. أنا فقر دم ومعي ضغط. يوميا والله، وعندي أخ بالبيت مريض. يوميا هذا العذاب اللي عم نتعذبه. مشان الله شوفوا لنا حل، افتحوا لنا هالطريق. روحة رجعة، نحن ما بدنا كراتين، بس افتحوا لنا هالطريق مثل بقية الخلق والبشر.
اليوم 23/4/2015 بعد العصر. ساحة أبو حشيش فارغة، لا يوجد أحد. ترست الترشيحة والملكية، ترست عبد القادر الحسيني. هذا هو مخيم اليرموك. لا يسمع إلا صوت الأبواب التي تقرع من الهواء داخل المدارس. شارع حيفا. رسالة من طفلة من مخيم اليرموك.
أنا اسمي تسنيم فتيان من مخيم اليرموك وحابة أحكي عن مشاعر مخيم اليرموك.
أنت كنت بيلدة ما هيك؟
إيه.
ليش اجيت على المخيم؟
لأن المخيم أحلى وأنا خلقت بالمخيم ولازم أضلني عايشة بالمخيم وصامدة بالمخيم عشان مدرستي وعشان رفقاتي ورفيقتي ماتت إنه كتير أنا زعلت عليها واسمها زينب.
كيف ماتت زينب؟
كنا عم نلعب بالشارع دحال قام اجى القناص الله لا يوفق كل من كان السبب بقنص هاي البنت وانا كثير بحبها هاي رفيقتي وراحت الله يرحمها بس ما فينا نحكي غير هيك الله يرحمها ونجعل السؤال احنا بنحب انه اللي برا كلياتنا يرجع على المخيم ونعيش كلياتنا سوا ونضلنا احنا كلياتنا ايد وحده سوا ونرجع بعدين على فلسطين.
شافت مخيم اليرموك مجموعة عين جلوس ينظفون مقبرة شهداء مخيم اليرموك. اليوم
12/5/2015. يهدينا النجم أحلى بريق كالشمس حبا وخير آيته مجد الأوطان.
أحد شوارع مخيم اليرموك شارع حيفا 24/4/2015. الأطفال يلعبون والحياة مستمرة. صحيح أنه لم يبقى إلا 18,000 مدني الأغلبية فلسطينيون داخل المخيم، لكن هذا العدد لا يستهان به لأنهم عانوا الحصار والجوع ومات أكثر من 200 شخص من الجوع. وجود هذا العدد أعتبره أسطورة وكفاح. ومن بقي في المخيم هو عنوان لحق العودة. توزيع الجلاءات في مدرسة الجرمق البديلة وتكريم جميع الطلاب والطالبات. مخيم اليرموك 11/5/2015. توزيع الجلاءات في مدرسة الجرمق البديلة في مخيم اليرموك 11/5/2015. يوم الجمعة 8/5/2015. صلاة يوم الجمعة وذهابي إلى المسجد شارع حيفا.
سبحان مغير الأحوال. في السابق لما كنت أذهب إلى الجامع كان المصلين بالمئات بالشوارع يذهبون إلى المسجد. شارع صفوريا. إلينا كم واحد جامعة منيح.
I invite just Moaz, if you want to ask some question about Yarmouk or about the movie or anything, we are here, or we can go to the buffet as you want. Moaz?
So Moaz, as you understood, live in Yarmouk. So please tell us some words.
This film, it was about Yarmouk camp, which it established in 1957. The Palestinian refugees who came after 1948, they came to the camp. The camp is the biggest camp for the Palestinian refugee in Syria. There were more than 200,000 Palestinians lived there before 2011. After the revolution, Syrian revolution started, a lot of Palestinians just left the camp. The most, like the majority of the people who left, who lived there. I mean, the Syrian and the Palestinian, because more than 8 million Syrian, they are outside of the country. So the Palestinian, they left the camps too. Okay, the camp, it's for the Palestinian, it was very important because being in the camp is just one form of resistance. One form because the people there, they believe that it was a temporary situation, and maybe after a while they will go back and to Palestine, to their village and city. And unfortunately, it's more than 60 years. And my grandmother, which she born in Tantura, Haifa, 1934. Now she is placed in another place out of the camp because the security situation in Yarmouk, and maybe she will die in out of the Yarmouk camp, I mean. So it's first she was refugee and now she is displaced. And okay, and the situation is bad. Any question about anything?
Somebody wants to ask question, or we can ask question then when having dinner together, all together, I don't know. But if you have immediately one question, please. Yeah, there are questions. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for showing us those tragic images. I mean, it's kind of shocking. We're just sitting here with our cushions and our food waiting for us. It makes me feel kind of bad, but I wanted to ask, because we're talking about architecture here, are there people in Yarmouk camp, because we saw them really cleaning the debris and everything, are there people managing to rebuild what is broken, or how does it work?
The last report for the United Nations that more than 60% of the houses in Yarmouk camp is destroyed particularly or completely. Now in the camp there are more than 20,000 persons, like 5,000 families. And I don't know if the United Nations actually delete Yarmouk camp from the Palestinian camps, like refugee camps, in 1995, so, because it's become after like one city. I don't know. We hope that the security situation just improve, so the people they could at least go back and build their house and the life just go on. We hope so.
We do indeed.
Okay. So thank you for coming, and thank you very much.
So thank you, both of you. Thank you very much. And now it's about 9:34. We wait 1 minute more, and we will have an Oriental dinner together to celebrate, well, all what we heard during the 3 days, which was very interesting, you know, about architecture. We are finishing on a more serious mood today, but architecture this year is completely concerned with society, people, and so it's important, after all, to see the people concerned by architecture. Thank you very much.